Steel Curtain Network.
Touchdown! Touchdown para Calvin Austin! El Monte Washington es arma. ¿Quién más? ¿Quién más? DJ Watt!
What is going on, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and welcome to another episode of the Steelers Preview. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Dave Schofield and Bryan Davis. Dave, what's up? How's it going?
Oh, it's going along. It's the 2024 season is actually almost officially over, even though it's really been over for a while. I'm just ready for it to truly be 100% off season rather than this limbo of not all the teams being at the same place.
Fair enough. Bryan, what's up?
Well, the off season is coming, and there's so much that we're going to be talking about is what this roster looks like. I talked the other day on my solo show, Bad Language, that we have no clue what this team looks like whatsoever, and the Steelers don't either. So it's going to be fun to see how they are built.
We are going to talk about that roster building because last week, in case you missed it, go back and listen. We wanted to talk about evaluating the Steelers from top to bottom, and we talked about from Art Rooney all the way down to the coaching staff. And then we didn't even get to the players and was like, well, let's just hold that till next week. So that's what we're doing today. And I think that it's appropriate to talk about this and the way they're building their rosters with a lot of the questions that we have surrounding this roster heading into the 2025 offseason. For instance, let's talk about quarterbacks with all the reports swirling, whether it's Jerry Dulac's article at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Aditi Kinkwabala going on 93.7 The Fan and kind of saying that that's not true. You have Jay Glazer giving his 2 cents. And Jay Glazer is a friend of Mike Tomlin, by the way. Let's keep that in the back of our minds, that they are not interested in bringing back Russell Wilson. And then even just this afternoon, as we do this show live on Thursday evening, Dale Lawley of Steelers.com says, in a quote from his X account, we talked about how no decision has been made regarding the Steelers quarterback situation. Why? Because that's the case. They haven't set their draft board, free agent rankings, nor have they ruled anyone out, including Wilson or Fields. Nothing has been decided. Okay. Now, let's look at this from just a general standpoint. If you want to bring up specifics regarding that rumor, report, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. How comfortable or how confident are you in the Steelers from a roster building perspective to be able to get this thing right? Because they need to have a good offseason. Dave, we'll start with you.
Okay. I'm like, so are we talking about the Russ thing? Or are we talking about that's okay?
It can be a part of the roster building discussion.
Yeah, they've got to figure out quarterback. I mean, they just have to make a decision. And I feel like I've heard Jeff's talk about that a lot. If you listen to Let's Ride, and it's been where he's covered it very well, and that is just you're going to have to go with it. And I don't think that they should wait around if they don't have to. But at the same time, it's crazy because some Steelers fans think that they should already have their quarterback signed right now. And I wouldn't do that if I was the quarterback either. I don't know. It's just that messy time of year where we don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, let's be honest, folks. If you're listening to this, watching this, whatever, and you think they should have already signed Justin Fields, if I'm Justin Fields' agent, and the Steelers approach me and say, we want to sign him to a 3-year contract. Here are the numbers, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to take it to Justin, but Justin, I think we could do better than this. Why would we sign this now? And unless Justin Fields overrules the agent and says, I want to be there, I don't want to be anywhere else, then we're going to test the waters. We're going to see what else is out there. And then if we want to come back and revisit this, we can. I don't blame the quarterback or the player for doing that at all. Bryan, what's your take?
I've been quite vocal about this the last couple of weeks, and it all comes down to this is Justin Fields' decision. They have to wait on what he decides because I don't think that they want to bring Russell Wilson back. But I think Russell Wilson is a plan B if they feel like they have to and they don't get Justin Fields, who is their man. And right now, I don't know if I'm Justin Fields, if I even trust this organization because of the way it started, even though they laid it out that you were brought in as a backup quarterback, but we will have, we'll see a lot of you. But it seemed like they waited a long time to see a lot of Justin Fields. And I know he did get hurt towards the end, But I don't know how Justin Fields feels about this whole thing, but I think ultimately it's his decision. Now, the pro on Justin Fields, for anybody that does not feel that great about him, it's the fact that, and I bring up Kevin Smith all the time, and I love the fact that he said this. He said, Brian, they did not have a scheme in place for Justin Fields. They had a scheme in place for Russell Wilson, and Justin Fields was trying to, make hay with a Russell Wilson scheme.
I think this is all intertwined in the topic of discussion today. Do you both believe that in today's National Football League, if you don't have a quarterback, we'll say a viable, borderline elite quarterback, you have no shot? Dave, you agree or disagree?
No shot. Let's just say you would have to have it's an extremely uphill battle where everything has to fall perfectly in order for you to get there and it work out in your favor. So I wouldn't call it impossible. I would just call it highly improbable unless you have a more than capable quarterback. And when I say more than capable, I mean, what are you talking? Top 10 quarterback, top 8, top 5, you've got to have that as one of those things that you have. I mean, my goodness, look, there are teams that you arguably have top 3 quarterback in the NFL. And not only do you not make the Super Bowl, you don't even make the playoffs. If you're even looking, if that's where you would put someone like a Joe Burrow. So even having it doesn't guarantee. So it's so hard beyond that. Now I know there's a lot of, with the Super Bowl coming, there's a lot of people that see a wider spectrum of how good is Jalen Hurts and everything. Do I think he's the second best quarterback in the NFL? No, I think that's crazy. But I think what makes him better is that he has such a great roster around him. So you can get by with a very good quarterback and not an elite quarterback if you have an elite roster. And that's about the only way that I think that you can do it. So quarterback is extremely important. Even if you have an elite roster, if you only have an average quarterback, I still don't know that it could get you there anymore.
Brian, what about you?
I want to look back in time. Let's go back to 1976, and the Steelers went 6-0 with Mike Kruzak. But they had the 1976 Steelers defense, arguably one of the greatest of all time. You have Jim McMahon and the Chicago Bears of 1985. You've got Trent Dilfer and the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. They had just intergalactically amazing defenses. And unless you have that today, you can't get away then also run quarterback. Now, the Steelers, I could even call the Steelers out on this too. Let's go back 21 years to 2004. Ben Roethlisberger was a rookie, but he had a phenomenal defense and a great cast of characters, and it allowed him to get them that far and have that 15-game winning streak. Not say he turned out to be what I think is a Hall of Fame player, but as a rookie, he wasn't really what he was then. He was not the best quarterback in the league. He was very strong, and they coached him well. And that might be the difference here. But if you look at the Minnesota Vikings from this year, that defense carried them a lot of the way. They had great receivers, and Sam Darnold just had to be pretty good. But when it came down to it, the last 2 weeks of the season and then the playoffs, Sam Darnold lost a lot of money because he wasn't good enough. And that's a guy that you got to beware of in free agency to bring him in. So that's not a guy. And if he's the best quarterback in free agency, you're not going to go that way either. He's fool's gold. He had a great year, but still fool's gold.
So do you think you can win in today's NFL without a quarterback?
No.
Okay.
I thought I was saying it.
Well, you went to like Trent Dilfer and you're all these other examples. Like, is he saying that you can't? I don't think in today's NFL, Trent Dilfers exist anymore. And mainly because they don't allow the defense to be that type of defense anymore.
That's true.
The defense that is we're going to scare the bejesus out of you, and we're going to inflict punishment. Like that was even early 2000 Steelers. I mean, think about the hits that James Harrison had on some of the Browns, and Colt McCoy, and was it Massaquoi was one of the guys that he knocked out from the game, and that actually led to a suspension. I think for me, this is why I said this on Let's Ride Tomorrow when I talked with Jeremy Betts. I think if I was doing a stock report of the fan base's hope for the team, it would be at an all-time low this offseason. I think people look at this team and think they can't figure out the quarterback position. And there's some people in the live chat saying that because they haven't made a decision yet or haven't really gone out and said they really want this guy or that guy, that they're undecided. And so therefore you're still in that purgatory unknown area. No one believes that there's hope on the horizon for another free agent that's not in-house coming in and fixing it. No one likes the 2025 draft class of quarterbacks. And so you can't get a quarterback. We just talked about that. What are they going to do to build a roster if you don't even have a quarterback? That's, I think, where a lot of people are saying, like, you could spend the 60 plus million, assuming they cut Preston Smith and Larry Ogunjobi to free up that 20 million extra cap space. So let's say you have 60 million in cap space and you spend 50 of it, big spenders, you don't have a quarterback. So I think this is where, do you trust the organization to be able to get themselves out of this hole? Dave, what say you?
Well, right now it's really difficult because it feels like what the organization is doing and how things are going aren't necessarily lining up. But at the same time, sometimes you also you gotta look at where we're coming from. Okay, with the Pittsburgh Steelers this last season, do you not feel that the Steelers significantly upgraded their quarterback room this year for 2024?
Yes.
And they finished with the same record and the same playoff result.
Fair.
So that's the thing. It's going to take a huge jump in the quarterback room, even more, or building up a really stellar roster around them, which, my goodness, look at the Steelers offense. They are so far away from that offensively. If you want to compare them to somebody like the Philadelphia Eagles, they're nowhere close. So the thing is, just because you have to have a top quarterback doesn't mean it's actually possible to get one. And the problem is, we talk about, it's the 80s all over again for the Steelers, with all that. You could say that, but in the 80s, you could win with an average quarterback. You had a chance to win it all with an average quarterback. To me, even from when we talked about the Trent Dilfers, when you mentioned that, what's changed is the rules in the NFL and how so much is geared towards the offense and how the quarterbacks are protected and everything that they're trying to do, that it's made it about really what the NFL has done is they've cut back the overall parity with things, because you really, think about it. When the playoffs started this year, how many teams did you really feel had a realistic shot from each conference to get to the Super Bowl? Maybe 3? Maybe?
I was going to say 3 or 4.
I didn't think there was going to be anyone else. For a while, I thought maybe it could be the Steelers, or no. Okay. Did the Texans really have a shot to go to in the Super Bowl? No.
Baltimore, I think, did.
Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, I would say. And honestly, for the NFC, you were talking Detroit, Philadelphia, and then the next
Minnesota.
one was a big question. It was probably Minnesota more than anything, and they bailed out. So that's why I could say even 2. So and that's what I love the Commander story. But were they really going to knock off both the Lions and the Eagles to then get to the Super Bowl and knock off the Chiefs? That was just going to be a little bit too much for them right now. What they've really done is they've really cut the NFL based on these rules that they want to have, that's more exciting and more offense, everything. They've really cut down on the number of teams that you feel could win the Super Bowl. Look at 2005 when the Steelers were the 6th seed. They just get in. Would you have been shocked if the Steelers didn't pull off that game in Cincinnati? Nope. But they did, and they ended up having a chance to get there. I just feel like that's kind of gone based on the rules. So therefore, you say that what the Steelers are back in and how they were at the 80s. No, I mean they're stuck almost a little bit worse. You're tier 2, and tier 2 right now is playoffs, but not Super Bowl. So and to get out of that and actually get the quarterback, the number of quarterbacks that could get there are so few. There's really no answer for them this offseason. So all your choice is you either have to go get the next great, fantastic quarterback, or you have to really build up your roster. So a very good quarterback is going to be enough.
I don't think that super great quarterback exists for the Steelers.
Yeah.
I mean, who would that even be?
Exactly. It's not possible. So you have no other choice than to do that.
Yeah. Brian, what's your take?
I actually think this team could win with Justin Fields. I actually think this team could win with Russell Wilson. More Justin Fields. I think this team could win with Matthew Stafford. You know, that takes a trade to go ahead and do something like that. I think they could, but you still have to build around them. You don't have to have the best cut of meat at the butcher shop, but you still need to have a high quality piece of meat. And if you do that, and if you surround them with the right ingredients, it's going to be a fantastic dish for everybody. But if you get a rotten piece of meat, you could put the best stuff in there. You can put the best Maryland crab and put crab imperial over that piece of steak. But if it's a rotten piece of meat, you're throwing up all night, and it's coming up both ends, boys.
I just feel like the distance between the haves and the have-nots in the NFL has never been greater. And Dave, you alluded to that. Mm-hmm. And you talk about the teams that actually could be vying for a Super Bowl. I had someone on Twitter sell me this, and it actually resonated with me. They said, Jeff, it's no longer Super Bowl or bust. It's going to be just, can you win a playoff game? Because this team is far away from a Super Bowl. I hate to say that, but probably right. And so until they can figure out the quarterback, I think what you got to do is, Dave, you said it. You either have to get your quarterback. I don't think that's feasible this offseason. So you got to build up your roster. You got to get your roster to the point that all you need is a quarterback. And maybe it is a 2026 drastic trade up to get someone. Everyone loves Arch Manning because it's a Manning and he's, played well at Texas in limited snaps and stuff like that. But whatever the case is, you got to build up the roster. So do you think, and do you trust as an evaluator, the Steelers with Omar Khan and Andy Weidel at the helm in the front office to build up the roster around the Steelers? Dave, we'll start with you.
I do, but I think the thing that frustrates me is why, and this isn't Omar Khan and Andy Weidel's fault, is, to me, I think the biggest mistake with this team, and I talked about it back when it was going on in 2022, they tried to get the quarterback without the team. And you really, and you didn't build the team, and they try, and there were so many Steelers fans and at our former outlet, so many commenters like, oh, you've got to go quarter. I'm like, but getting quarterback wrong is more damaging. And right now, if the Steelers forced something with a lot of money or sold the farm to move up in the draft and get it wrong, they're screwed even more. So it's a whole thing of, if you can identify that you can't do it, then you have to go all in on building everything else up around. And I like this group more because my goodness, tell me if I'm wrong, but Kevin Colbert never drafted an offensive tackle in the first round. Right? Because when it was Broderick Jones, you had gone back to what, Jermaine Stevens, or it was the last first round tackle. So right. he never did. So they didn't do that. I mean, my goodness, part of me is almost like, if there was a stud guard in the first round, it wouldn't shock me if the Steelers went there, or something of that nature, just because at least they're investing it there, which I think is good. But they also have so many other holes. And the problem is, do I trust it? I say yes, but at the same time, the Steelers obviously had a big hole at wide receiver this past year. And although they tried to fill it, they didn't get it done. And I mean, even bringing in Mike Williams partway through the year, which was, hey, at least they did something. But then they still never really tried to utilize him. It's almost like there's a disconnect of got to get the people there, but take the kid gloves off of them. I've said that 100 times about quarterback. I mean, my goodness, people wanted to see Roman Wilson, but they had the kid gloves on him. I get it if that's really was the problem, but I felt like they had too many kid gloves with Mike Williams and things of that nature, that sometimes it's like it doesn't seem consistent when it comes to adding people and then how they're actually utilized on the field. I mean, they traded for Preston Smith, had him inactive a couple times, didn't get to, just often didn't have Mike Williams on the field when they were added in the middle of the season. So while I say I trust it, I trust that maybe they could try to do something to add it. I just don't know that they'll actually get the whole thing interwoven together that's going to give a big boost on the field.
All right, Brian, what do you think?
I absolutely trust this team as far as evaluation goes. And that includes Mike Tomlin and Art Rooney. I trust them for evaluation. But when you're talking about a draft, I'm sure they would have loved to have had Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers wasn't dropping to him. If they did, the Raiders didn't really have Brock Bowers, on their list because didn't think he was going to show up. And when he did, they just threw everything away and went after Brock Bowers at that point. So, there are different things you can look at here. Of course, the Steelers would have not passed up on Josh Allen or Mahomes or guys like that if they were there. It's just, can you go ahead and get a quarterback like that picking in the 20s all the time after a mediocre 10-7 or a 9-8 season? That's not going to happen unless you got to look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They traded up to get Patrick Mahomes. They would have not gotten him unless they pulled a big move, and they still only traded up to 10 to get him. So you've got to think about stuff like that. The evaluation's fine. They know how to evaluate players. They've done some really fine evaluating with some of the guys that they brought in. They evaluated Peyton Wilson better than anybody because they pulled the trigger on him with their fourth pick, even though it was a third-round pick. That was their fourth pick in that draft, and they pulled the trigger on it because their evaluation on him was good. So I have no problem with evaluation. It's just then trying to figure out whether it fits the need. I think Dave hit it on the head when he said everybody was hell-bent on getting a quarterback, and Colbert fell right into that thing too in 2022. When, if you look back at it, I haven't looked at a 2022 redraft, but who else was there in a different position, and how much stronger would have this team been if they didn't pick Kenny Pickett?
Cornerback Trent McDuffie was the pick right after Kenny Pickett.
And there you go.
He's probably the best one, except for maybe Tyler Smith on the offensive line in Dallas or Tyler Linderbaum in Baltimore.
And he's not free this weekend either, is Mr. McDuffie. He's busy. I think he's playing a game.
Yeah.
So there you go. That might change everything.
I do not trust this team. My trust in the Steelers organization has gone from great to basically non-existent. I am going to bring this up. Kyle Smith put it perfectly. And I agree. He said, I trust Khan and Weidl more than I trust Tomlin and Rooney. So my trust in them by default is limited because they are limited. I think that's spot on. And that's just my opinion. Obviously, I agree with Kyle. So
that's kind of almost what I was trying to say, but I used way too many words and didn't put it as good as he did.
I see, I kind of, I'm not sure about that because on the we're talking about the evaluation end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're telling me that Mike Tomlin cannot evaluate players in a draft.
Mm-hmm. I have serious questions. He was every bit a part of Kevin Colbert in those last, 3 or 4 years that were absolute god awful, that set this team back for years. It's not just Kenny Pickett. Go down the list. You got Terrell Edmonds. He's a first-round pick. It's not a first-round talent. What are we doing? You know, I mean, Ryan Shazier gets hurt.
I'm still frustrated with Najee Harris.
Yeah, you take Najee Harris.
Creed Humphrey in the first round, and they didn't even take him the second.
You don't have a line to block for the back, yet you take him. And I question their ability to evaluate where to put players. Yeah. You look at Kevin Dotson as like exhibit A. Let's play him out of position, and then we'll ship him off to another team that puts him where he's comfortable, and he is getting a big-time contract because he's playing so great. Even Kendrick Green, in a limited ability down in Houston, played better. I mean, you could talk about, look, everyone's in the live chat. They're going to Senquez Golson in the second round, Artie Burns in the first round. Like, these aren't good picks. And I
Devin
like
Bush trading up 10 spots for him. They
went aggressive. They went aggressive, and they got the wrong Devin. I mean, because Devin.
No, honestly, the other one hasn't panned out as well either.
No, he didn't either.
You're right. So I do think there's reason for criticism. We'll put it that way. Like, Brian, you can be loyal to him. That's fine. I don't trust them. I don't trust them to make the right move anymore. I really don't.
It's not loyalty. It's just I'm talking about something different than you're all talking about. I'm talking about evaluating.
Yes.
Yeah, and honestly, I do like. I feel the last two drafts, although, people are like, they drafted injured players. No, they didn't draft injured players. They drafted players that got injured. None of them came in injured. And it just so happened that the only player that did not miss any time from this past year's draft class due to injury was the one player that had the huge injury concerns. Peyton Everybody else missed at least a little bit of time. But these last two drafts have just felt, and the thing is, just because they agree with the pundits and everything and what fans are thinking doesn't mean that it's a good draft. But the ones that we thought were kind of, I mean, do I have to play it, Jeff? Don't draft Kenny Pickett. Don't draft, do I have to keep I still got the audio here.
You can play it if you want. I said it. I'm not going to lie. I said it. I was live streaming.
Those things that we were just like, oh, don't do that. Like I was so frustrated that the Vikings drafted Christian Darrisaw right before the Steelers ended up taking Najee Harris, because I didn't know who else to take there once Darrisaw was gone. But some of these things, I'm like, I don't know about that. At least these two, I mean, we can find out that the two most recent drafts are actually as well, when you get to 2, 3, or 4 years when you can evaluate them. But they're trending better than what it was towards the end there. So that's why I think that it is better at evaluating talent right now. But I'm also, like I said, kids gloves with Roman Wilson. Who they really did kids glove with Joey Porter Jr. last year, which I'm not always saying it's wrong, but they really do that. I mean, he was 32nd overall, and they wouldn't start him until half the season was over, just because it seemed like it was more just because.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give Brian a chance to rebut and give his take right after we take a break. If you're watching us live on any platform, we're not going anywhere. For us on the audio side, we're going to take a quick break. Hear word from our sponsors. We'll be right back. All right, Steeler fans, we're back, and we're having this discussion. It's not a debate, I don't even think, about evaluating the roster. Brian obviously says that he does trust Mike Tomlin in terms of an evaluation standpoint. We've given our takes, but I want to give you a chance to explain yourself, because you said you felt like you were talking about something different. So I'll let you explain yourself.
Well, I'm going to say one thing, because I am getting just lambasted here, because everybody's telling me Claypool and all these picks. All right. I see your Claypool. I see your Edmonds. All right. How about Huey Richardson? The great Chuck Noll drafted Huey freaking Richardson. You love Bill Cowher. Jermaine Stevens, Dion Figures, Troy Edwards. They can't draft a guy named Troy, except for Troy Polamalu. All right. You get a good one. That's great. But, you want to jump on all of this. Let's look at Belichick. Yeah. Let's look at the bust that he's had in the first round, too. Everybody has bust in the first round. Evaluation is fine. You're telling me that guys like Weidl and even the guys before them, like the great Bill Nunn, who had his hand on drafting some of those busts, it's a crapshoot when you're drafting somebody, and it every single time. So great. I'm fine with you saying that. Right now, you don't trust Mike Tomlin. You don't trust Art Rooney. You don't trust him right now. And that's fine. But I'm reading in the comments, you're saying that this man is mediocre at everything that he does. He's one of the greatest, winningest coaches of all time. Yeah, come on. Be frustrated now. You have every right to be frustrated, but don't come at me for saying that they've made some pretty good draft picks too. I thought Lawrence Timmons ended up being a great draft pick. That was the very first draft pick of Mike Tomlin. He's had other very good draft picks and excellent draft picks. So when he does something right, you're going to go ahead and give the credit to somebody else. But when he does something when he makes a bad pick, it's all Tomlin. And you don't know what's going on in that room. Go back to 1983, where Dan Rooney walked into the room and said, I think we should draft Marino. And they're like, yeah, actually, that's a good idea. Where did you get that idea? Well, I was talking to John Clayton. They're like, screw that guy. No, get out of here. And they didn't draft him. So you know what? You blame people for what you want to blame them on. Give them some kind of credit.
Okay.
Everything.
Hold on, Dave. Everything you said was accurate. And he has had good picks to offset some of the bad ones. So the lack of success, where do you put that? Like if you're pinpointing, okay, we talked about Hartman, all that stuff in terms of a roster though. There are definite deficiencies on this Steelers roster right now. There are gaping holes still. Who gets the blame for those deficiencies, Brian, in your opinion?
I'm blaming it on those same guys in scheme. But when we're talking about evaluation, you can't tell me they cannot evaluate players. I'm blaming it on the scheme.
So you're blaming everything on scheme.
Yeah,
so then
the way they're scheming these guys.
But wouldn't the evaluation for that scheme be a part of it?
I'm talking about evaluating players.
Right, but don't you evaluate for a scheme?
I'm talking about evaluating draft play. Yeah, and I get what you're saying, but when you go ahead and you draft great players like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt and other great players that you bring in to this defense, and then you turn around and you give them a horrible defensive scheme, that's the difference here.
So you're saying the selection of the coaching staff is the issue.
Yeah, I think that's more than anything. I think the scheme that you're coming up with is more of a problem. But you're bringing in good players and you're not putting them in the best situation. But if we're going back to evaluation, I'm going to scream from that hill that entire time. And no, I'm not dancing. I'll go toe-to-toe with you, Mark Malone, all the time.
He used to play for the Steelers. Dave, I'll let you tap in.
Well, first
he's a bad first-round draft pick.
The first thing I want to say is, Brian, you forget where we are right now. Anything that's good with the Steelers is something else, and everything that's bad is Mike Tomlin. That's the way the cool kids say it now. Okay, now is there plenty of blame on Mike Tomlin? Absolutely.
What is good about the Steelers right now?
What's that?
What is good about the Steelers?
Oh,
right
just just anything that you want to say, anything that they can do well or whatnot. If you want to say, oh, that's a good decision, it's going to be as far removed from Mike Tomlin as what most fans are going to do, because that's the cool way to be. And the thing is, so many times I say, I wish we could have the realistic conversation of where Mike Tomlin does a good job and where he doesn't. See, I'm of the opposite of Brian. The problem with me, and especially on offense more than defense, is that, and I did this on my very first Unpopular Opinion podcast, is that the Steelers are actually overachieving based on the talent they have. They're actually better coached and doing better than they should. Constantly, they are constantly getting more wins than they're projected. They're winning more games where they're picked to lose than they are losing games that they're picked to win. It's supposed to be 7 or 8 wins, and it's 10. Even when you look at individual games going into it, whether they're favored or not, or their wins for the season, they're overachieving because they're actually doing more with less. The problem is they don't get the excuse of having less. They had one of the most incomplete offenses in 2024. That's not that you don't get a pass for that. Now, did they through the middle of this? See, part of the reason I think things fell apart at the end is that they were just out of options. They had taken the people that they had and what they were trying to do at wide receiver and trying to get as much as they could out of them, and they did, and then that got counterpunched, and they really had, and they didn't have another swing left in them. I mean, you could make that argument, but to me, I get what you're saying about the scheme. There are some issues there, but I mean, especially when you look at defense, because they had the players on defense and they won't do anything with them. So to me, that's why I feel like it's almost a little bit of both, depending on where you're looking for the Steelers. They had the talent. They went vanilla at the end. The defense wasn't the same. For the offense, they didn't evaluate to get the right talent, to get enough talent to really get them there this year. So hopefully, because they're more young, they have a lot of rookies on offense, maybe they can continue to grow, but they really have to add to it.
I'll say this to kind of put a bow on this is when you talk about the issues on this team, it stems back to our conversation last week on this very same podcast about the front office. And so you have coaching issues, scheme issues is a coaching issue. Mm-hmm. You also have evaluation issues, whether it's playing those players to the maximum of their capability within the scheme or not. And when I think about it, it gets me so frustrated because there is a common denominator here. And it's what we talked about last week. It's the team president that is, working hand in hand with the head coach in terms of who are you bringing in to be your coordinators? What schemes are they trying to execute? And are we going to get the players that are necessary to run those schemes? And do you trust that the coaching staff are able to do that? I think we can all agree there is a major disconnect in those two realms. Yes. And when you have a disconnect, you are not going to be competing for a Super Bowl. When you look at these two teams playing on Super Bowl Sunday, there is no effing disconnect in their organization. They have a front office, they have a coaching staff, they evaluate for their scheme, they find the players that fit, and boom. That's where you see these rosters that are so good and so deep. I just don't understand what is taking the Steelers so long to get in with this type of methodology. Yes, I understand the GM switched a couple years ago, but we're in year 3 now of Khan and Weedle, whatever the hell it is. I think we need to figure this thing out because if not, it's pretty damning for those at atop the food chain. Dave, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, you said that about disconnect and look at the teams here. I think that's what happened to the Eagles last year.
Possibly, yeah. They changed everything.
I mean, they had just as good of a team last year, and they were rolling. And then there was some disconnect there, and they fell apart. This year, they didn't do it.
Yeah, Brian, I want to let you say something.
You know what? Actually, I like the way you're wrapping this up. I'm fine. I think that this is something that there's a lot of problems, and nobody's going to be happy with it until they're 17-0 at this point.
I'll just take a playoff win at this point.
Yeah, and I get it.
All right. Do you have a Super Bowl memory, Brian, you want to bring up?
Yeah, actually I do. And it's kind of I'm going to go away from what I usually do here because I talk about happy, great memories, but I want to talk about the 2 Super Bowl losses and how I watched them with such great hope. And I've watched highlights and I've watched some different, I've watched full games of these and I saw where things went wrong. But I remember there were 2 moments in each of these games that gave me such hope. And one was the onside kick against Dallas. Remember how great you felt with that onside kick? And you thought they had a chance to go ahead and end up winning that game after that stop with Troy Aikman falling down. And it all fell apart. But after that game, you still felt proud of that team. You really did. Then you go to the other game against the Green Bay Packers. They were down by 18 points in this game, and they had an opportunity. They got the ball back, and next thing you know, there is a touchdown, and then Antoine Randall gets the 2-point conversion, And it's 28-25, I think, at this point. Or is it 25-22? It's something like that. And they get a stop. They get the ball back right before the fourth quarter. And Rashard Mendenhall gets absolutely crushed. That ball pops out, and they never recovered from it. But they still had an opportunity at the end of that game. And you still left that game feeling proud of that team, even though they dropped the ball on everything and they lost it. But you look back and you thought, wait a second, I'm a fan of the 6-2 Super Bowl Pittsburgh Steelers. I still feel on top of the world, even though we're not hoisting that Lombardi. That's how I felt, at least.
So can you imagine, like in 1995, and here we are in 2025. In 2025, in the Super Bowl, coming out of halftime, if that were to happen, Andy Reid would have to go to a ref and say, can you please tell them we're about to onside kick?
No,
so they
you
can
can't.
Yeah, you can't.
You have to be trailing, and it has to be in the last 5 minutes of the game?
Oh, that's
you can't even do it now.
Yeah.
so stupid. I hate that so much because when I heard about the rules where you have to notify the team that if you're going to do an onside kick, I thought about that play in 95. I thought about how there was such a, and didn't the Saints Colts game have a similar play where they went onside as well? Like,
Yep.
These are
Saints to start the second half, right?
Yeah. Like these are just momentous occasions in these huge games. Suck the life out of it. All right, Dave, you got trivia?
I do have trivia. Well, first of all, let me just ask you guys something here. What's the current line on the game this Sunday?
I saw it change to Chiefs -1.
The last I saw right before we went live, according to DraftKings, I saw them -1.5.
So they've kept it at 1.5 with a total of 48.5, I think.
I didn't even look at the total.
Okay,
but that's a pretty narrow point spread. What's the largest? Do you guys remember what the largest point spread is? Now, this is according to ProFootballReference.com, who did game. That's the one the game started. Okay, the spreads that they had recorded. What was the largest spread?
Was it Super Bowl 30, Dallas over Pittsburgh?
No.
I actually think it was a year before Super Bowl 29,
Chargers,
San Francisco and San Diego.
Chargers 49.
Yes. Do you know what it was?
Well, I think the game Jeff was talking about with the Steelers and Cowboys was 13, so this one had to be like 14 or 15.
Well, yeah. Well, like I said, this is Pro Football Reference numbers. They had this. The Steelers and Cowboys were 13.5. This one, the Niners and Chargers, 19.
Oh my goodness!
And not only was it 19, they covered.
They were like 24, I think, right?
So, but I mean, and there's other ones that were more than the Steelers Cowboys. For example, which Super Bowl was it? Come on, was that Super Bowl 3? 18 point spread, Jets and Colts.
Oh, that was the Joe Namath game.
Yeah.
And
the
Jets won. Funny thing about that though is you were talking about a time when it was NFL against upstart AFL. In these, if you put it to these days, it would be NFL versus UFL.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was, but that's not the only 2-touchdown Super Bowl spread where the team lost. Do you guys know what the other one was? Team favored by 2 touchdowns and lost.
My gosh.
I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to think.
It's crazy because
could have been the Rams and Patriots.
That was probably the only time I was pulling for the Patriots. That was it. The 2001 season. Yeah, well, it was in played in. It
happened in 2002
from the 2001 season. Yeah, 14-point favorites, and they won.
Freaking Spygate year, damn it! Sorry,
yeah, I know. Now here's the final question.
I had tickets to that game if the Steelers went.
Here's the final question.
They destroyed the tapes for a reason.
According to Pro Football Reference, there has been one Super Bowl that was dead even at kickoff. Do you know which Super Bowl that was?
I'm going to guess it was one of the Super Bowls in the 70s with Steelers Cowboys. Which one? I don't know.
I don't have a guess. But yeah, I'll make a guess. Super Bowl 18, Raiders and Redskins.
Okay. That one, there was actually Washington was favored by 2.
Okay.
Jeff, you were saying the Cowboys and Steelers. I'm trying to see if I can find a Cowboys Steelers. I have them done by spread and not by anything else. I don't think that was
what was it?
The case. Believe it or not, it was a game that came down to the wire when a certain number 3 happened to throw an interception at the goal line.
Oh,
Seahawks Patriots.
Seahawks, yeah 49.
Seahawks, Patriots. That was a line of 0.0 to start that one.
The left shark game of Katy Perry.
Malcolm Butler, right? Wasn't he the one that intercepted the ball?
Yep.
And that was the last Pick'em Super Bowl.
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, there were some others that were just 1 point. If you want to know what those were, I don't have the Super Bowl number. I just have the teams. Okay. That was Miami won. They were favored by a point over Washington in the 72 season. Philly beating KC back in the 2022 season. That was a 1 point game. That was a 1 point spread. And the other 1 point spread was the 1981 season, San Francisco and Cincinnati. That was 1 point spread.
You know what's weird about that Super Bowl 7 you mentioned, Washington and Miami? Miami was 17-0.
Yeah.
Wasn't that the John Candy game, the 49ers and Bengals when Joe Montana?
No, that was the second one you're talking about.
All right.
That was Super Bowl 23. Dave's talking about 16.
Got it.
I forgot that they met twice.
So, all right, good stuff. Let's do some final thoughts and call it a show. Brian, I'll let you go first.
All right. I got a little hot under the collar, which shouldn't be like that in the off season, should I? I should be all happy. It's my national holiday. It's Super Bowl weekend. When you watch the game this weekend, I know this team is so far away from being in this game, but imagine how you feel when they are. And even though it seems impossible, and I can't tell you when, but they're going to get back there and you're going to have that feeling again. This is not like the Pirates in the 1979 World Series and bust. So I will just say this, watch this game, but you will not feel complete until you see the Steelers back in there. It might take a long time, or maybe something crazy happens right around the corner in the next couple of years and they are back in it. There were days back in 1998, 1999, 2000. I never thought they were getting back in that game. They came awfully close in 2001. They came awfully close in 2004, and they finally did it in 2005. And the way 2005 was looking, they weren't getting in. And 8-game winning streak and just awfully good luck happened. So keep the faith.
All right, Dave, final thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how that works out sometimes because 2004, man, all in. I believed. I think we all, 15-1, look out for this team. Go, 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 go. But in 2005, it just wasn't working out right. It just wasn't the same. And it was the year before when you thought it was going to happen and it didn't. And what ends up happening the next year, you didn't think it was going to happen and it did. So right now, if you kind of want to use a Super Bowl comparison, if the Steelers don't have an option to get a Patrick Mahomes for 2025, what they have to figure out is what's the closest thing we can get to Jalen Hurts with a great team around us. I mean, some people might be offended by saying it like that, but it really where a quarterback is really, really helped by the rest of the roster as well, like a young Ben Roethlisberger was as well. So the Steelers have to make that decision, and I think a lot of Steelers nations feel like, hey, out of everything that's available, Justin Fields is probably the most likely one that, hey, if you get everything around him right, maybe they could do something and make a little bit more of a run. You might feel that way. You might not feel that way. And that's fine, because that's the joy of this time of year. We all have differing opinions and we're very passionate about them at times. But ultimately, we just want to see our Pittsburgh Steelers win friggin' football games and be relevant and win a championship again. Because, I mean, I went so long in my life without the Pittsburgh Steelers winning a Super Bowl. I am crushed that, well, granted, my daughter was months old the last time the Steelers won a Super Bowl, but but neither one of my boys has this Pittsburgh Steelers won a Super Bowl in their lifetime. I don't want them to be like me and have to wait so late into being an adult until they get to experience that. And that's what we all ultimately want. So I don't know about you all, unless for some reason I do bingo. This is the first time I think I don't have plans for a Super Bowl because I really don't care. But unless something happens where my kids talk me into doing Super Bowl bingo, you know what I'm going to do? If I do watch the game, when the clock hits 0, I might watch a minute or two, and then I'm turning it off because I don't want to watch some other team celebrate. That's what I can say. You know what? My team wasn't the one there with the confetti. It's on to 2025.
Fair enough. For those that want my thoughts, check out my Let's Ride podcast tomorrow. I talk about the Super Bowl, all the Steelers stuff you could think of, and Jeremy Best joins me, so check that out. Also, I want to remind everyone, check out SteelCurtainNetwork.com. We got a facelift. It's a beautiful looking site now. It's much more Steeler-centric. Good comment section, good community. We're trying to grow that community. Go check out SteelCurtainNetwork.com. Very proud of that. Everyone that's a part of this group should be proud of that. So check it out, SteelCurtainNetwork.com. But in the meantime, Dave, why don't you send us out like you always do?
Hey.
We'll see you next week on our Steelers preview. Take it easy, everyone.
Steel Curtain Network. Get it.
Everybody else gets a little tight.